wife or property? Here is a brief history about how women became legal people. Because until pretty recently, being married to someone meant becoming their property if you were a woman. Hey fam, welcome back to Stay at Home Feminist. Your soft girl era starts here along with the fall of the patriarchy. It's your girl, CC Banks, your favorite feminist with a TikTok addiction. And today we're getting into some feminist history. This episode was actually inspired by the episode I did a couple of weeks ago called They Didn't Burn Witches, They Burned Women. Because that is my best performing episode by so much. I was so excited to see it resonate so well. So I was like, okay, all right, I hear you guys. I will keep it up with the feminist history because I love to talk about it. And if you love to listen about it, let's go. Let's do it. So please comment, like, subscribe, do all the things, and let me know what aspect of herstory you'd like me to dive into next. And if you haven't watched the Witches episode, go do it. All right, let's go back a little bit in time and set the stage here for us girly pops. Imagine a world where marriage meant you ceased to exist. No, this isn't a Black Mirror episode. This is how things were for women for centuries. Before, when women were married, every paycheck they made, their own body, and even their name legally became someone else's. Women couldn't own property, women couldn't sign contracts, they couldn't open credit cards, and they couldn't even refuse sex from their husbands. Yeah, it does sound like horror fiction, but this was real life for a very long time, and we still feel the effects of this today. But slowly and maybe painfully, women fought to be more than property with cute clothes. So how did we get from there to here, and what was going on back there? Because I feel like they don't teach us that in history. Wonder why. Let's get into this archived roadmap of how the law fully erased women at one point in time and how feminist grit reclaimed our names, our incomes, our bodies, and our rights. Because if you think the patriarchy is a 1900s problem, girl, it's still bargaining for custody over your body. So let's learn from history and make sure we don't make some of those same mistakes now. Let's go. What is coverture? AKA the legal disappearance of wives. Before divorce was acceptable and before it was legal to divorce your husband without him being the one to give permission for the divorce, there was a law called coverture. Under coverture, when a woman got married, her legal identity was absorbed by her husband. Legally, they basically became one person, and the one person was her husband, which meant she couldn't own property in her own name. Her wages, if she worked, belonged to him. She couldn't sign legal documents or take out loans or even sue someone in court. And I know this sounds wild, but this was the standard for centuries. Coverture came from English law and hitched a ride into the early Americas, so it's been here since the founding time, since the inception. And it basically said that women don't exist as real people, not legally, not economically. And we could really paint marriage as the issue here, but women and girls weren't really legal people before marriage. So it was sort of just like a transference of same old, same old. What do I mean by that? As a girl, your legal identity was owned by your father. And when you got married, your identity got transferred like a deed straight to your husband. And then the two of you would become one person under the law, but like he kept all his rights and you never had rights. So you kind of just get absorbed into him. That's why women take their husbands' names. It's not like a cutesy thing. Oops, sorry, feminism. I took my husband's name. Honestly, just for logistics. Like, I'm lazy. It just felt like easier than, I fight the power in a lot of ways. You're all tired. It just felt like easier. Sorry if you hate that. I kind of hate it too, but then I'm like, what am I going to keep my dad's name? Like, he's also a man. Like, I'm having a man's name no matter what, unless I go and make up my own name. I feel like there's no good way. There's no good way. Also, my maiden name now kind of sounds like my married name. So for me, it wasn't like that big of a change and didn't seem like that big of a deal. But I get why historically and like fight the power it is. So I don't know. What do you guys think? I don't have a good answer here. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But my husband was super supportive of whatever I chose. And I think that's a very important part. Anyways, so that's why women take their husband's name, is because it's like, you're a part of him now. Ew. So back in the day, married women were called femme covert, meaning covered women, as in covered up. As in erased, as in legally invisible. So invisible that they couldn't sign a contract, that they couldn't sue or be sued, that they couldn't own property, not even their own clothes, and that they had zero rights to their own children. So if you left your husband, you weren't just cut off financially. You would lose your children too. You were property trying to leave property, your children, according to the law. So where did coverture go? Because technically it's still kind of here. It didn't really go anywhere. Yes, it got chipped away at and like watered down over time, but it was never fully abolished. That's why women weren't allowed to consistently serve on juries until the 1960s. That's why marital rape wasn't illegal nationwide until 1993. 1993 is not that long ago. That's why even today, women still get hit with weird financial, tax, and property restrictions, which all usually assume that the man is the adult in the room. Coverture is like that toxic ex who technically still isn't in your life anymore, but still finds ways to like mess with your credit score. And it's honestly so creepy the way that for centuries society has found ways to devalue other humans, whatever the marginalized group is, because it's one thing for your husband to be in charge of your bank account, but for him to be in charge of your body is like, especially thinking about some of the verbiage being normalized today with the leaders in office here. It's like, oh God. I feel like it's giving Don't Worry, Darling a little bit, where, yeah, men really want coverture to be back in the swing of things. And they're like, it never really left and we never really addressed it. So what if we just creep it back in? No, thanks. No, thank you. No. Yeah. Under coverture, marriage meant permanent sexual consent. So that's gross. But yeah, it meant everything of yours belonged to your husband. Whether it's your money, your children, or your body. Like, sure, your husband couldn't legally kill you, but anything short of that, for centuries, the law pretty much was like, meh, go ahead. Women aren't really real people anyways. And that's what coverture is all about. But because women are resourceful as hell, real life wasn't always as bleak as the law intended. For example, dads who didn't trust their dumb son-in-laws to handle money created legal loopholes so that their daughters could inherit money, land, whatever it was. We see this. I know this isn't like a real story, but it's based in real things. We see this in the Gilded Age when Gladys is married off to the Duke. I feel like he was a Duke. When Gladys is married off to the Duke, we see her dad be like, okay, I'm going to give you the money, but it like kind of has to go through Gladys. So that's like a good example, even though it's like a fictional story, but you know what I'm saying. And even though women weren't really legal people, they still found ways to manage businesses, sometimes as femme sole, which basically means they were temporarily recognized as legally independent, or other times just doing the work and letting the men in their life sign the paperwork. The bottom line is that coverture was the patriarchy's legal blueprint. It turned your wife into an asset. And while the laws have changed and women have more protections, they all grew out of this same blueprint. And we see it today with wage gaps, with financial abuse, with credit discrimination, with reproductive control, with whose signature counts more. So as we see people try to discredit women or take away some of their protections that so many women have fought so hard for, remember that women built their own personhood, one lawsuit, one protest, one act of rebellion at a time. And the work is not done, my girly pops. Our ability to be recognized legally as our own independent people, unfortunately, is sort of a privilege. That wasn't always the case, and actually often wasn't the case for centuries for women. Coverture made women disappear into their fathers, into their husbands, into whatever man was in their life controlling things, and they never got to be their own legal person. So all of these women who say they hate feminism, do you hate being a person? Do you hate having your own phone and your own social media account? Do you hate having your own credit card? Do you hate being able to say no to your husband when you're not in the mood to be intimate? Do you hate your college degrees, your master's degrees? Do you hate being able to own your own clothes, being able to own a home, being able to own your cell phone that you're making a video on to tell the internet how much you hate feminism? Do you hate all of that? Because if so, go churn the butter in the prairie fields. There are plenty of places where you can have no phone and no clothes and no property, and no one will bug you. But while you are still using your phone and owning your own clothes and owning your own credit card, maybe you can just be quiet and enjoy the fruits of the labor of feminism that women have fought for centuries. Okay, thank you. So women push back against all of this not being able to be a legal person bullshit. And in the early 1800s, states began to pass laws that chipped away at coverture. We saw this in Mississippi in 1839, and then in New York in 1848. And these laws became templates for other states to pursue them as well. These laws were the Married Women's Property Acts, and they allowed married women to own property, so real estate or personal property, again, like clothes. And they allowed women to keep the wages they earned and to essentially maintain somewhat of a legal identity outside of their marriage, outside of melting and morphing into their husband's identity. But of course, that progress was patchy. Coverture had been the name of the game for so long, and states varied. Even in states with these laws, which not all states had them, families would still use loopholes or intimidation to maintain control. Still, these acts were huge. For the first time, legally married women had a chance at autonomy. It was messy, it was limited, and it was unequal, but it started cracking the foundation. It started chipping away at the status quo that was coverture. As the Industrial Revolution kicked off, everything got a little more chaotic. People were moving, jobs were changing, capitalism was capitalizing, and suddenly the old husband controls every single little thing legal structure wasn't working as well as it was before. Because spoiler, when dudes went bankrupt, which happened a lot, their wives and their kids were dragged down with them. So lawmakers, not out of a feminist awakening, but because the economy demanded it, started saying, maybe women should be allowed to own a little something so the whole ship doesn't sink when Chad makes a dumb business decision or a bad investment. Enter Married Women's Property Acts. These laws rolled out state by state with no master plan, no coordination. And again, took a lot of women on the front lines fighting for this. Ultimately, it was done because it was better for the economy. But women had been demanding this, which even got them thinking about this being considered. So I don't mean to minimize that in the way that I told that story, just little asterisk there. So this was huge. Women becoming legal humans was huge. By the late 1800s, most states had passed similar laws, though the slowpokes such as Delaware, Virginia, and South Carolina dragged their feet until the last possible minute because of course they did. But let's be real, even after these laws passed, courts and communities didn't always want to follow them. Coverture didn't die. It was basically coexisting very awkwardly with these new rules. But women fought and they finally won the right to keep property that was theirs before marriage. Again, go back to the witches episode to see a little bit about how men decided to deal with that. Keep money they earned after being married, inherit wealth separately from their husband, and to be able to sign contracts related to property. Was it groundbreaking? Yes. Should it have always been like this? Also, yes. This was one of the first cracks in the patriarchy's legal armor. And again, not out of compassion, but because capitalism hates unreliable assets, and husbands were unreliable assets. Fast forward to the 20th century, women are working, women are earning, but the system often still pretends like they don't exist. Until 1974, most banks refused to give women, especially married women, credit cards or loans without a male cosigner. That changed with the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, and suddenly, at least on paper, credit couldn't be denied on the basis of sex or marital status. Let that sink in. In 1974, a woman couldn't buy a car with a credit card on her own without her husband's say-so. Even after those property laws existed, actual financial independence was blocked. Banks, credit markets, housing, all locked behind this patriarchal underwriting of everything, which is crazy because access to credit underpins everything: housing, business, education, economic security. Let's talk money, honey, because until 1974, which isn't that long ago, like our moms were there, women literally were not trusted with money by the law of the land. Before the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, banks treated women like, oh, sweetie, you want a credit card? Who's the man that's responsible for you? Let's see what he thinks about it. Like, what? And they weren't grilled about their finances when they were applying for credit cards. They were asked, are you married? And where is your man if you are married? You can't be doing this without him. Do you have a husband to co-sign? Oh, no husband? Maybe a father, brother, random male acquaintance. A woman could have perfect income, a stable job, flawless repayment potential, and the banks were still like, cute, but where's your male supervision? For so long, if women didn't have a male cosigner, they didn't get the money. Point blank, period. End of story. No ifs, ands, or buts. Women were locked out of the consumer economy. They were locked out of independence, of safety nets, of generational wealth. Then came our girl, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. RBG. She was serving feminist justice like Oprah hands out cars. You get a right. You get a right. You get some rights. In Reed v. Reed in 1971, RBG argued that treating men as the default and women as backups wasn't just rude or shitty, it was unconstitutional. And the Supreme Court said, you know what? Fair point. That ruling cracked open the door for the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause to finally apply to women too. Yes, you heard that right. Women literally had to sue to be included in the Constitution's definition of people. And as I mentioned, in 1974, Congress passed the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, meaning you couldn't deny a woman credit because she was a woman. 2 years later, Congress expanded the law to ban discrimination based on race, color, religion, national origin, age, or receipt of public assistance. Basically, finally, banks had to judge people based on whether they could pay a bill. Wild concept, I know. There were other rules too, like lenders had to respond within 30 days. And if they said no, they had to tell you why. And we women could take lenders to court for discrimination. So yeah, I guess the takeaway here is that up until the mid-70s, women had no financial autonomy. Married women were still treated like an extension of men. Credit access was literally a boys-only club. This wasn't ancient history. This was your mom. This was your grandma. This is why economic abuse still thrives today. And this is why feminism is so important, because without women fighting for themselves, fighting for their peers, you wouldn't be able to have a credit card, babe. So even though women could own credit cards, we couldn't say no to our husbands when they wanted their way with us. Yeah, let's get into marital rape and consent. light, easy topic, you know. Legal autonomy isn't just about wages or property. It's about your body. For a long time, most states legally recognized that marriage meant perpetual consent, that the husband had an automatic right to have sex with his wife, and the wife had no control, and rape laws specifically excluded spouses, even as late as the 1970s and 80s. It wasn't until 1993 that all 50 US states criminalized marital rape. Let that sink in. Until the 90s, women who were married did not have control over what was happening to their body in terms of the legal landscape. And that's what I mean when I am like, the ghost of Coverture still lingers. We chipped away at some of it, but we never really addressed it. And that's why stuff like that went on for so long. That's the thing with the patriarchy. It doesn't just disappear, it mutates. Even decades after the Property Acts or the ECOA and marital rape legislation, women still face financial discrimination. They still face predatory lending and income bias. And economic abuse remains very, very common. Some scholars argue that Coverture's spirit lives on through subtle legal and economic mechanisms. I would say not so subtly, but okay. This isn't just like old-timey law talk. This is still very real and very present today. It's why the gender pay gap persists. It's why women disproportionately suffer in divorce or if they leave a relationship. It's why credit and housing remains more fraught for women and single parents. It's why reproductive rights and bodily autonomy are always under threat. That's why it's so important that we work through coalitions, through community building, to dismantle institutions that base identity and power on race, gender, class, things like that. Because unfortunately, this isn't really a history lesson. This is a living struggle that's still felt by so many people today. And in this episode, we focused on a smidge of the journey that women have had to go through to be considered legal people. But women aren't the only minoritized community or marginalized community who has had to fought to be considered a person. We have a very dark history here in the US of prejudice and bias and harming people because of their religion or their race or their immigration status. And again, that's not a thing of the past. That's something that is very present today. And that's why systemic bias needs to be addressed, because until we get to some of like the root causes, the issue will persist. The issue will take on new shapes, but it will persist. But yeah, anyways, all that to say, your body, your choice, babe. Stay financially independent, whatever that means for you. Your body, your money, your future, all yours, all yours. So I hope that helped provide some context to the world we're living in today and the way that the patriarchy has the status quo of the patriarchy, the way we've chipped away at it, but we haven't really addressed fully things like Coverture. There's nothing that does that in a real way here in the United States. So while we've poked some holes in it, like she's still there. She's still there. And until we really fully address it, how can we fight it? And that's why I think it's so important to even create conversations around what has happened and what has been the societal norms. Because if we don't know what we're fighting against, how can we be prepared to fight? Today, I see just not even the laws, which I see very scary laws that are targeted at women and other marginalized communities, but even just the verbiage that our leaders, our policymakers use to dismiss, diminish, threaten women and other marginalized groups is disgusting. But sadly, I'm shocked but not surprised, because it is both a root cause and a symptom of America's very racist, very misogynistic history. And it's something we're going to deal with until we deal with it. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like the only way out is through, and we have to create these conversations and educate ourselves so that we can really know what we're looking at and see it with open eyes and like learn better so that we can do better. I think because misogyny is so inherent, people just accept it. I'm so sick of that. Was it Italy? I'm pretty sure Italy, it might have been Spain, but I'm pretty sure it was Italy that just made femicide a crime, like killing women for being women. Like that, it's not considered a hate crime. People are just like, yeah, that's normal. Men be killing women. What do you want us to do about it? And it's like, no, femicide is a real thing that's happening around the world in almost every country, no matter what the predominant religion is or climate is or where the region is or what language they speak or what kind of clothes they wear. Like femicide is happening at alarming rates. And we just act like it's just another day. It's just another day. I made a TikTok that, or I said like men ain't shit. And it was totally like making a joke in the wrong room because it got like minimal views. It had like 10 likes. It didn't go that viral, and like 11 comments. And all the comments were for people being like, that's not funny to say men ain't. I'm so mad. Women always are beating down on men. Okay, first of all, it's a joke. Okay. Second of all, like if you're more mad at me saying men ain't shit than you are at the men who murder women on a daily basis, get out of here. Get out of my comment section, you fucking loser. Like maybe if men weren't like so unstable and violent, we'd be good. And yeah. I know it's not all men, but it's often men. And it's enough men for me to be like, men ain't shit, and you should be able to laugh at that. I say that shit to men all the time, and secure men will laugh at that because they understand they're not the man I'm talking about. So if you're very triggered by that, go to therapy and talk about me and therapy. Living rent free in that head of yours. I think that's all I have to say today. I think that on that note, yeah, take up space, be loud, be crazy. And for real, be crazy, because it was crazy back in the day for women to be like, I deserve to keep the money I make at work. And now we're able to do that. So just because someone says something crazy doesn't mean it is. Maybe the way the world is crazier. I hope that helps. Thank you so much for joining this episode of Stay at Home Feminist. Again, please like, comment, subscribe, share, do all the things. And I hope you're having a very merry and bright holiday season. I know that the holidays can be stressful and that it can be hard with certain family dynamics. So if you're someone who is having a tough time this holiday season, just know you're not alone. Everyone's Instagram life looks a lot friendlier and a lot happier than it is. Having a hard time during the holidays is a real thing that a lot of people go through, whatever that looks like for you. So just know you're not alone in that. Just take things one day at a time. All you can do is your best. And sometimes your best doesn't feel like enough, but that doesn't mean it's not your best. And that doesn't mean it's bad, you know? Okay. See you next week. Comment what other feminist history you want me to discuss, because I'm ready. I'm ready to dive in, girls. Non-gendered girls, always. Anyways, stay alert, stay angry, and stay soft where it counts, where you need to be. And always claim your space, claim your rights, and claim your worth. Mwah.